In this tutorial, you will be guided through the action-oriented task template. We will walk you through the design of an appropriate light task for your particular set of learners. The task template is divided into two main sections. Section 1 is the template itself and will be the focus of this tutorial. Section 2 presents a set of instructions designed to help you navigate Section 1. We will elaborate on these instructions in this tutorial. In Section 1, there are 5 parts. This tutorial will help you complete each of the parts listed, but they don't need to be completed in this order. Be prepared to move back and forth across the different parts of the template as you design the task. To help you develop a task, you will need to consult the number of documents that we have compiled to help you. In the linked year package you were provided, please take a few moments to locate the following documents before you continue. We will be referring to these documents throughout the tutorial. In order to complete the task template, we recommend that you follow these 6 guidelines. First, begin by using a backwards design. Second, select the relevant descriptors for your task. Third, develop the subtasks and lesson plans. Fourth, check the task to ensure that it is balanced. Fifth, create your assessment tools. Finally, review the task for completion and coherence. We will be looking at all 6 of these steps in depth, starting with step 1. When designing your task, the best way to proceed is to use a backwards design. This means that we will think about the objectives first, as well as a possible task scenario that allows you to embed those objectives into a real-life activity. Think of a real-life situation your learners might encounter, where these objectives would be relevant. To begin, you will need to think about your particular set of learners. Ask yourself some of the following questions. What is the target CEFR level? For example, A2, B1? What is the context? Are the learners in elementary school or middle school? Continue thinking about an appropriate task. What type of task would help the learners achieve these objectives? What do you expect students to be able to do by the end of the task? What are some other languages in the students' plurilingual repertoires that can help them achieve the task? How can you embed this in your task planning? As you draft an appropriate scenario, reflect on how this can contribute to the learner's holistic development in terms of their body, mind, spirit, and emotions. You will need to keep the quadrants of the medicine wheel in mind during every stage of planning. The medicine wheel overview and tutorial can help you better understand the implications of the dimensions involved. Once you have thought about the previous questions, you can now use that information to begin filling out Part 1, the task description. We suggest that you fill out sections 1 to 7 at this time. You will have a chance to refine this section later as you finalize the task. Here is a completed sample of sections 1 to 4 of Part 1. The short scenario should be written in language directed at the learners so that both students and other light users can easily understand the task. Later on in Part 3 of the template, you will be describing the task in greater detail, planning each stage of your lessons. For other examples of level and context-appropriate tasks, you may wish to browse the action-oriented task catalog provided. Now that you have drafted your scenario, you will need to select relevant descriptors for sections 8 to 12 in Part 1, the task description. Having a series of descriptors will help you make explicit the main actions that learners will be able to perform by the end of the task and how they will perform those actions. Let's start with Section 8, Communicative Language Activities Expressed Through Can-Do Statements. These refer to what the students can do in terms of speaking, writing, listening, interacting, or a combination of these. Use the CFR the extended set and the CFR descriptors catalog to help you select the relevant descriptors for your CFR level. The guide is particularly useful because it is divided into the same sections of the template, so it may be easier to navigate than the extended set. As you browse through the descriptors, you might think that many or most of them can be applied to your task. However, we suggest that you limit your selection to only a few main can-do statements to make your task more feasible. You may want to adapt the descriptors to meet the specific needs of your task, such as specifying the type of text or type of situation. Here's an example of an original can-do statement, and one that is modified to fit a particular task. Now that you have your list of communicative activities, let's move on to Section 9, Communicative Competences. Here, you will need to identify the different competences that come into play. This means concentrating on the how rather than just on the what. It is important to keep in mind that the same activity can be done with a different quality of language according to the proficiency level of the learners and still be effective. Ask yourself, which competences do they need to perform the action? Which competences can they develop by performing the action? As you know, in language learning, there is much more than grammatical precision. One needs to be able to function appropriately in different situations, for example, by using the right register or being able to address a person, start or finish a conversation, and respect both linguistic and cultural conventions of a given context. To help you select relevant descriptors, consult the CFR Descriptors catalog and the separate list of sociolinguistic, pragmatic, and sociocultural descriptors to help you. Again, these may need to be adapted to fit your specific task. Next is Section 10, the plurilingual and pluricultural dimension. As we saw in the tutorial on plurilingualism, students don't start from scratch when learning a new language. This previous experience can help them in their learning process. Integrating a plurilingual dimension will also help them develop sensitivity to other languages and cultures. In order to complete this section, think about where and how students' plurilingual repertoires can be involved. For example, they could be made aware of the similarities and differences in vocabulary and cultural perspectives on the task topic. Use the CFR Descriptors catalog to select a few relevant descriptors. Learning is a process of mediating and also reflecting. These are reflected in sections 11 and 12. To complete this section, you will need to consult the CFR Descriptors catalog and the Ability to Learn overview. For selecting relevant mediation descriptors, ask yourself the following question. How will students help themselves and others understand and produce the text linked to the task? For completing section 12, ask yourself, how do students reflect on their learning process and build on their strengths? There are no proper descriptors for ability to learn in the CFR, but our document on ability to learn language learning strategies can help you. Once you have finalized part 1, you will have a complete understanding of your goals and the different dimensions you will have to bear in mind. Now you can begin to design the various lessons or subtasks that will help your learners prepare for the culminating task. In your planning, don't forget the various dimensions of the medicine wheel that you have identified as relevant. To help you plan your lessons, think about how the task can be realistically broken down into subtasks. Each subtask should help learners build the competencies they will need to move towards the culminating task. Here is where your Part 1 overview comes in handy. Think about how the different subtasks can be designed to focus on the descriptors you've chosen. Part 3 task development helps you with this. Include your notes on what happens, who does what, and which resources you and the learners will need. Remember that these instructions are meant for you. Now that you have planned your lessons, you now know how much time and what resources you will need, and you are aware of the potential stumbling blocks. So now with these elements, you should be able to complete the remaining sections of Part 1, Task Description. Returning to your medicine wheel quadrants, here are some questions you may want to ask yourself as you plan each subtask. White, will learners focus on their metalinguistic awareness? Yellow, is the task connected to the community? Red, will learners create visuals to support their learning? Black, is the learning cyclical? Does it occur in formal or in informal settings? Once you have seen which quadrants are more relevant to your task, you will be able to reorder these accordingly in Part 1. Now let's move on to Step 4. Because you have many elements to consider, we've designed the Task Planner to help you visualize how your work will develop towards the culminating task. This will help you see all of the elements together and identify any imbalances you may want to correct. You can do this in Part 2, My Task Planner. You may want to start with the culminating task and work backwards. This way, you can identify any inconsistencies more easily. For example, you might notice that the culminating task focuses on oral interaction, but oral interaction has never been covered in any subtask. Or, several subtasks may focus on pragmatic competence, but this is not necessary for the culminating task. After you have completed Part 2, you may need to refine some aspects of Part 1 and 3. Feel free to do so at this time. The next step is to create your assessment tools. In the template, there are 2 parts to the assessment. Part 4, the observation checklist to be used by the teacher, and Part 5, the self-assessment checklist to be used by the students. This is a very easy step because you already have all of your descriptors listed in Part 1 of the template. Here is a sample excerpt from a completed observation checklist for Part 4, the teacher's use. The empty checklists are organized around the descriptors you have chosen in Part 1, Sections 8 to 12. Here's an example of Part 5, the self-assessment checklist for the student's use. You can see that the student's checklist will look slightly different from Part 4, the observation checklist. For both the category names and the descriptors, language should be written in a way that students can understand. For example, instead of the category name communicative activities, the student's checklist reads, "What I can do in the language I am learning." The descriptors will also need to be expressed in I can form and reworded so that the students can understand them with level and age appropriate language. You may find that not all of the same descriptors will inform your observation checklist and the self-assessment checklist. For grading purposes, please see the separate document titled Assessment Rubric. This rubric is designed for summative assessment, but can also be adapted for use with formative assessment. This document can also be adapted to the activities you are working on, and according to the grading system of your institution. Now that you have finished creating your assessment tools, return to each section of the task template and ensure that all of the sections are complete and that all parts are coherent with one another. Of course, things don't always go according to plan. That's why we recommend updating your template as you and your students work through the task. Recording any changes and modifications can help you with your future planning. It can also help other educators plan their own adaptation of the task in their contexts and be better prepared for some of the stumbling blocks they might encounter. This is the end of the tutorial on the action-oriented task template. On behalf of the entire Linked Year team, thank you for your hard work.